Welcome to The Explainer. You know, we all live by the law, but have you ever really stopped to think about how it all works here in Malaysia? Like, where do the rules even come from? Which court handles what? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and demystify the whole thing. We'll break down the rules, the courts, and why it all matters.
All right, so before we dive deep into the nitty-gritty of courtrooms and legal jargon, let's just take a step back. Let's start with the big one, the most basic question. What even is law? I mean, we talk about it all the time, right? But what are we actually talking about?
Okay, so here's a great way to think about it. The law is basically the official rule book for a country. It's the set of principles the state uses to keep things in order, to administer justice. It's the do's and don'ts that we all agree on so that society can function without, well, chaos.
So, here's what we've got on the agenda. First, we'll look at the sources of law. Then, we'll climb the court ladder. After that, we'll check out the specific powers of those courts, get to know some other key legal players, and wrap it all up with the key takeaways. Let's get into it. All right, first up, where do the rules even come from? You might think there's just one big book of laws, but in Malaysia, it's actually a bit more interesting than that. The whole system is built on two main sources, two very different foundations that work together. So here are the two big categories. On one side, you have written law. This is the stuff that's formally passed by Parliament and state legislatures. Think the Constitution and Acts of Parliament. It's all there in black and white. Then, on the other side, you've got unwritten law. Now, this is fascinating. It isn't passed in the same way, but it's just as real. It comes from things like English common law, decisions made by judges, and even local customs.
Let's dig into written law for a second. At the very top, the absolute supreme law of the land is the federal Constitution. Nothing can go against it. Then you have legislation. These are the laws, the acts, and enactments passed by Parliament and the state assemblies. And finally, you have subsidiary legislation. Think of these as the detailed rules and regulations, like bylaws, that put the big laws into action on the ground. Now for the unwritten law. This stuff is really shaped by history and practice. A big part of it is English common law, which we've adopted to fill in the gaps where our own written laws don't have an answer, as long as it fits our local situation. Then there's judicial precedent. This is huge. It's basically judges following the decisions of earlier higher courts. And finally, you have customs, these long-standing local traditions, especially for family stuff like marriage. A great example is adat papadi.
And there's something else that's really important to understand. For Muslims in Malaysia, there's a parallel legal system that runs alongside the civil one. This is Islamic or Sharia law. It mainly covers personal and family matters, and it has its own separate Sharia courts to handle these cases.
Okay, so we've got the rule book. Now who are the referees? Let's talk about the courts. Malaysia's court system isn't just a random collection of buildings. It's a very organized hierarchy, like a ladder. Understanding this ladder is absolutely key to seeing how the whole system works.
Think of it exactly like a pyramid. Down at the bottom, the wide base, you have the subordinate courts. That's the sessions and magistrates courts. This is where most cases begin their journey. As you go up the pyramid, you get to the high courts, then the Court of Appeal, and right at the very tip, the apex, is the federal court. The higher you go, the more serious the cases, or you're there on appeal.
So why does this pyramid structure matter so much? It all comes down to a really important principle called judicial precedent, or sometimes you'll hear the Latin term stare decisis. All it means is that a decision made by a court higher up the pyramid is binding on all the courts below it. It's a non-negotiable rule. This is what creates consistency and predictability in the law. It's a pretty brilliant system, really.
All right, so we've got this ladder of courts. But how do you know which step to start on? Well, it all comes down to one word: jurisdiction. And don't let the fancy word scare you. It's basically just the court's official power, its job description, to hear a specific kind of case.
Let's try a real-world example to make this super clear. Let's say you're in a civil dispute over a debt of 500,000 ringgit. Where do you go? You can't just pick a court at random. So which one has the power to handle your case?
Okay, let's look at the subordinate courts. See how their powers are spelled out? For civil cases, it's all about the money. The magistrates court handles the smaller stuff, up to 100,000 ringgit. But the sessions court can handle much bigger claims, anything up to 1 million ringgit. And on the criminal side, you can see the sessions court can hear almost everything, except cases that carry the death penalty.
So, back to our question about that 500,000 ringgit debt. The answer? You're heading to the sessions court. It's the right place because the amount falls squarely within its jurisdiction, which goes up to 1 million. Simple as that.
Now, what about the courts higher up the ladder? Well, the high court is a big deal.
It hears the most serious civil and criminal cases. We're talking cases involving the death penalty, and it's also the first stop for appeals from the subordinate courts. Above that, the Court of Appeal, as the name suggests, hears appeals from the High Court. And at the very top, the Federal Court is the final court of appeal. The buck stops there.
Okay, so we've covered the main pyramid of courts, but that's not the whole story. The legal system also has a bunch of other key players, specialized bodies set up to deal with very specific issues.
Over in Sabah and Sarawak, for example, you have the Native Court. This is so important. It's a court that specifically hears cases related to native customs and land, what's known as adat. It's a way to make sure those unique local traditions are respected and upheld.
Then there's the Industrial Court. Ever heard of someone claiming they were unfairly dismissed from their job? This is where those cases go. It's a special tribunal that deals specifically with disputes between employers and employees. It's all about employment law.
And what about cases involving young people? Well, there's the Court for Children. It handles offenses committed by minors, so anyone under 18. And it's very different from an adult court. It's held in a closed setting, and the focus is really on rehabilitation, not just punishment.
And finally, we can't forget the Attorney General. This is a really powerful and unique position. The AG basically has two huge jobs. First, they are the main legal advisor to the government. And second, they are the public prosecutor, meaning they have the ultimate say on who gets charged with a crime in the country. It's a massive responsibility.
Phew, okay, that was a lot to cover. So after that quick tour, what are the absolute key things you need to remember? Let's boil it all down to the essentials. All right, here are your key takeaways. Number 1, Malaysian law has a dual foundation. It's built on both formal written law, like the Constitution, and unwritten law, like court decisions. Number 2, there's a clear hierarchy. The court system is a structured ladder which ensures things are consistent. And number 3, every court has a specific role. Their job description, or jurisdiction, makes sure the right cases go to the right place. So there you have it. It's a pretty complex system, right? A blend of constitutional supremacy, laws from parliament, and judicial precedents from judges. And that leaves us with a big final thought to chew on. In a country that's modernizing and changing so fast, how does a system like this, with all its different layers, adapt? How does it make sure justice stays not just stable, but also fair for everyone in the future?